Hi, folks. It's Dr. Christine Sauer again with the Sparkles for Mental Health podcast. It's all about mental health and personal growth. Today, I'm extremely excited to have Kevin Palmieri. Do you pronounce it right, Kevin? Your last name sounds Italian. On the show. Kevin is the founder and co-host of the Next Level University podcast. And I may say so, he has an awesome free course, and I'll make sure to share the links all over the place. Kevin has himself found success, but after brush with suicide, he realized that he wasn't living the life he truly wanted. So many of us hit that roadblock. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have a young sparkle on the podcast.
Thank you very much. As I said before, I am excited to sparkle together. I appreciate the wonderful intro, and I am excited to chat with you today, Christine.
Thank you so much. And let's get started. Kevin, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you to becoming the person you are today? How did you get started, and what made you choose personal growth?
I think, like a lot of people, I had a very painful breakup. And after this painful breakup, it created the necessity for me to say, you know what? I've put a lot of emphasis on making money and having nice things. But the one thing I haven't put emphasis on is building myself up internally, my own self-improvement, my own personal development, making sure that I'm a competent human being. So I started focusing on self-improvement. The next year, I ended up making $100,000 in my job, and that required a lot of travel. I was in the construction industry is the best way to explain it. And it's interesting, Christine, because for the entire year, I thought if I made $100,000, everything would get better in my life. And my bank account got better, and I felt more financially free. And those are two great things. But after I opened my pay stub, I realized that nothing inside of me had changed. Nothing internally had changed. I was still not confident. I was still insecure. I still didn't really like who I was. And I realized in that moment that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I did what any young man does. I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And at the beginning, it was just a passion project for me. I was interviewing friends and just talking about deep thoughts. But eventually it got to the point where I was so in love with podcasting and I was so miserable at my job. I couldn't handle traveling anymore. I couldn't handle the long shifts. I just wanted to have a normal life. And I ended up waking up in a hotel room in New Jersey in the United States, which was like 6 hours from where I lived. Like I said, I spent a lot of time on the road working. My alarm clock went off at 5:15. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots, getting ready for the day. And the best way to explain it is there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station.
Wow.
And one was saying, you're stuck at your job forever. One was saying, if you do leave here, what are your friends going to think? If you do leave here, what is your family going to think? And do you really think you can be a successful podcaster? And I did not think I could. And in that moment, Christine, I felt like if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. I'm very blessed because I have a tight group of people around me. So I messaged one of my friends. I told him what I was going through. And he said, Kev, I think you need to change your environment. So 3 or 4 months later, I left my job and I went full time into what we're doing today. And I ended up partnering with the friend that I texted at my lowest point. And then we began the entrepreneurial journey, and I was very broke for the next 3 years. And I've learned a lot about myself. And it's definitely been a challenge, but that kind of catches us up to where we are today.
Wow. It is awesome to see those success stories. And so many people have gone through low parts in their life. And many of my clients, especially, but many people generally get stuck in that low part and they think they are lost forever. What helped you get out of that rut and not get stuck?
Yeah, I think it was 3 things. I think it was 1, somebody gave me permission to take a chance on myself. So when I reached out, his name's Alan, he's my business partner. When I reached out to Alan, he said, well, Kev, why don't you change and go get a new job? Or why don't you start your own thing? Imagine if I reached out to somebody who didn't believe in themselves they probably wouldn't have believed in me. So they might have said, well, Kev, you need a job. You can't leave your job. You make such good money. So one, the permission that somebody else gave to me. The second one, I believe, is I had a mission because I had started the podcast already. And because I felt the pain that I felt, it became my mission to help other people avoid what I went through. I really think when you have a mission or a purpose greater than yourself, you're going to pour more into it. And I think the last one for me was I actually believed the future could be bright. That was something that was pretty rare for me. I had assumed that my future was, or my current was, the brightest part of my life because of all the money I was making. Alan helped me realize that the future can be brighter. So I really think that because of the people that I had in my life, that really helped me avoid getting stuck in that moment.
That is really helpful tips. And also, I noticed you don't tend to be a dreamer, because many depressed people that are chronically depressed, they have thoughts going over and over in their head, and they never get out of their head and translate it in doing.
Yeah.
So did you have moments where you just went in your head and it went round and around and around and you just couldn't do it? Or how was it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because that makes me think of several times in my past where I had thought about starting a business. I had started about one time I built a website and I was going to do courses and I was going to do all these things. And then after a week or two, it just ended up getting lost and I didn't do it again. But there were several times where I had these ideas of something I could do, but I never got around to doing them. And I don't know if I ever attributed it to depression and or anxiety. So that is a good connection to make. So I would say yes, 100%.
And maybe it's good that you didn't, because if you had seen a doctor, gotten medication, you probably wouldn't be the person that who you are today.
That's very true.
Know about it. But that said, I really love that you did it, overcame it. And I know you emphasize that it's important to look in your past, and I agree. So let us know a little bit, where did you grow up? What was your childhood surroundings? How did you become the person that even as a teenager and young man was successful in the normal meaning of the word?
I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, probably an hour outside of Boston, and I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I actually didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So we were definitely lower middle class. We never had a lot of money. But what money we did have, my mom and grandmother were always very generous with. And that's one thing I definitely have gotten from them. But I think it was a pretty normal childhood. I mean, I played outside with my friends. I played a lot of sports. I used to ride my bike around town and talk about how we were going to be famous and rich and successful one day, like a lot of kids do. And I think for me, I was just trying to figure it out. I was never bad in school, but I was never anything too great. And I knew that, and I think this is an interesting thing, Christine, I don't think I ever wanted normal. Even like when I look back, I knew I didn't want to go to college when I was in maybe before high school, honestly. So I think my through line of my life is that I've always wanted different. I didn't want a normal quote unquote life. I didn't want an average quote unquote life. I just didn't know what I truly wanted. And the best way for me to find that out was to get what I thought I wanted and then realize, well, that is not it. So yeah, I think it was pretty normal childhood, all things considered.
Now, let me ask you, did you ever do like many kids nowadays, play on their phones all day, go on social media, things like that?
No, so I'm 30, I'm going to be 33 next week or in 2 weeks. And when I was young, we didn't even have phones. So I am still of that generation. I remember when I got my first flip phone and social media did not exist. There was you couldn't get on YouTube. You couldn't do anything on these phones. You could play Snake and you could text, and text messaging cost a lot of money back then. So it wasn't like it is today. So no, there was no social media around at that point. So I was very much outside. If I was not at home watching TV, I was outside playing in the woods, playing sports, riding my bike, that sort of thing. Yeah.
What do you think that social media and the distractions of our modern world have done to young people?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. I think the number one thing, and this is the analogy I try to use, 30, 40, 50 years ago, if you wanted to see a quote unquote celebrity, you either looked in a magazine or you watched it on television. And now there are so many quote unquote celebrities on social media that I think we are comparing ourselves to people way more because perfect seems way more normal now. And I'm putting perfect in quotation marks. So I think the number one thing social media has done, especially to young minds, is change the way that we play the comparison game. I think comparison can be healthy if you're comparing to the old version of you and the future version of you as the current version of you. But if you're comparing to somebody else's highlight reel, I think you're in for some trouble. And what I will say is, and I always try to say this to help, I've met a lot of people who are very successful and very perfect on social media. And I can assure you, they are not perfect behind the scenes, just like I am not perfect behind the scenes. So that's always an important distinction. And I think the other thing I would say is it's created a lot more opportunity, but also it's created a requirement for a lot more discipline. You have access to see into everybody's life at any given second throughout the day. While you can also be very successful with social media, it can also take you down a rabbit hole of distraction that will stop you from ultimately accomplishing your goals. So yeah.
I love that you say it requires more discipline, because it is really very true. If you don't actually schedule your day around the things that you want to do, you get lost.
Yes, 100%.
Because I notice it myself when I check my emails in the morning. I have to set myself a time limit. Hey, enough of that. And social media, I hardly ever am on it because it's just a rabbit hole. Did you ever get addicted to anything or felt the need to use anything that wasn't so really good for you?
I was definitely addicted to pornography for a time when I was younger, definitely 16 to 22. That was like a time for me. And that was something very, very challenging. And honestly, full transparency, social media makes that very difficult because people on social media aren't always wearing the most clothes, and that can be very triggering. So that was the biggest thing for me. There was never really any substances, but I would say pornography was definitely one for sure.
That's interesting. Why do you call it more an addiction and not just an obsession that young people often have when the hormones race?
Because I couldn't stop. Even though I knew, logically, I knew this probably isn't what's best for me. I just couldn't stop doing it. I couldn't figure out how to stop until the pain was great enough eventually. But yeah, that's why I think everybody has not everybody, but many people have an interest and they have maybe a slight obsession. I think it was an addiction because I couldn't stop even if I wanted to.
No, that's a very, very fair statement. My question, you said until the pain was great enough. What was the pain and what actually helped you to get out of that? Because that might help others that are dealing with similar or the same addiction.
Yeah. I was in my early 20s and I was having sexual dysfunction. I mean, I'm supposed to be, this young man who's in shape, and here I have an intimate relationship and I cannot partake in certain intimacies because things aren't working the way they should. And that's when I started to research pornography and what it does to the brain and dopamine and all of that. And then I realized, oh, okay, I'm actually doing something negative to my body, although it seems like a positive experience. So the pain of that relationship, the struggles that I was having in it, intimately, as well as the awareness that I gained when I started to research, that pain was pretty heavy, both of those combined.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the breakup of a relationship nearly killed you, basically, and it is very painful for the best of us.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important thing? I don't know. Are you a parent? I should ask that first. No? Okay. What would you tell a young person? Say you're a big brother to somebody. What would you tell a young person are the most important skills to learn in the modern world as it is today?
Great question, Christine. Number one, I believe, is self-awareness. there are few things that you take with you throughout your entire life, but your awareness is one of them. And if you don't understand yourself, it's very hard to understand how the world affects you. And when you understand yourself at a deeper level and you understand the world, theoretically, you understand everything at a fair deeper level. So from my experience, asking myself why, and then going down the rabbit hole of, okay, why am I insecure in this moment? Oh, because I don't feel good enough. Okay, well, why don't I feel good enough? Because that person knows more than me. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? And then just digging into that rabbit hole that's been very, very, very important.
Mhm.
I would say, especially now, consistency. If I can't do the splits right now. If I tried to do the splits, I wouldn't even get close. But if I consistently practiced every single day for the next year, I'd be able to do the splits. And I think that's a good analogy for success. It's a good analogy for relationships. It's a good analogy for wealth. Today, more than ever, the importance of consistency it's there because there's so many distractions. If you can show up every day and just do a little bit better, a little bit more, a little bit different, you can make massive progress over 5 years. When we started the podcast, I never pictured having 1,000 episodes, but we just have been consistent over the last 5 years. So yeah, I would say self-awareness and consistency are two of the most important things in the world.
I love that. I really trust discipline works right into it
Mhm.
because to be consistent, you need some kind of discipline or you
100%.
won't.
Yeah.
Now, if a young person said, what field of work should I go into? What are the most important skills to learn to make a living these days? What would your answer be?
My answer would be very different than if you asked me a few years ago. I would say the number one skill to have now is imagination. The time that we're in, there are people who make millions of dollars a year playing video games. I remember when I was young, my mom said, "Hey, you got to take it easy with the video games. You're wasting your time." So I really believe that you have to hang on to your imagination because who knows what is possible for you. That's number one. And then I think another important skill is humility. So the ability to admit what you're really good at, but also the other end of that, the ability to admit what you're not very good at. If somebody comes to you and says, you're an amazing blank, and you really are, true humility is saying, thank you so much. I worked really hard over the years. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I love the way you did this, but I think you could improve this. True humility is saying, thank you so much for the feedback. I'll definitely take a look at that. I'm always looking to learn and grow. I think humility is such an important thing to have because the world is a different place in terms of people hiring you and the way communication is had. I would rather hire somebody on our team who is humble enough to say, I don't know how to do this, than somebody who says, I know how to do everything. Because usually they don't. And usually the person who's humble can learn the new skill. So I think humility is a superpower as well.
Love that. Now, a young person, would you recommend them going to college or university?
If that aligns ultimately with what you want in the future, yes. But what I would say is just be very careful of what's inspiring you to do that. I know a lot of families want their children to go to college. If that is not the path that you want to take, you have to be vulnerable and have a conversation about that. The best thing I did was not go to college because for me, it would have just been a waste of time and a waste of money. So it all depends on what your ultimate goal is in life. And I think now is the best time to explore. So if college doesn't seem like a fit for you, that does not mean you cannot be successful. Some of the most successful people walking the planet did not go to college and they've learned a lot on their own. And some people are very, very, very successful who also went to college. So I think it depends on your personality. I think it depends on your skill set. I think it depends on your discipline level. And it depends ultimately on what you want in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
That is a very fair statement. And I myself always warn kids not to go to a certain way just because their parents want them to.
Yeah, 100%.
That is a recipe for unhappiness going on later. And I personally feel these days you can basically learn anything online if it's not a professional career like lawyer or doctor, accountant.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're better off doing it that way because then you can switch career faster and in the end it's cheaper. On the other hand, it's nice to have friends around at university and hang out and have a beer, which is not good for your career in the long term.
Well,
As
there's
you said.
certainty. There's
Yeah.
certainty too. If you go to college, maybe there's more certainty around, I have a degree that says I can get these jobs. So it depends. Yeah, to your point.
Depends on what if you want a job or if you want to be an entrepreneur.
For sure.
And that's an interesting choice too that many people don't consider. They say, oh, I have to go to university, and then they study something like English literature where there is really no living in it unless you become an English literature professor or write books.
Yeah.
And I see people that wasted a lot of money on that.
Yeah. Well, luckily for me, I don't think there is a college of podcasting yet. So maybe in the future it will be, or maybe we'll create it. I don't know, but I'm grateful I chose the path I did. But I think on the other end, there's a lot of people who may have chosen a path similar to mine who didn't get to where they want to go. So it's a very personal decision.
It is, and I appreciate that. And everybody has to make that decision together with maybe their parents if they finance it too.
Yeah, for sure.
And think about what they want to really do and what they want to do going forward. Oh, wow. That is fascinating. Now, we talked about social media. We talked about unconsciousness and consciousness. Now, you also talk about habits. What are your most important habits? How did you develop them and how do you maintain them?
Great question. We try to break our habits into the most holistic way possible. So we break our habits into health, into wealth, and into love. So that is how we create our habits. It's okay, what is something under health that needs to happen? Maybe it's track your calories, weigh yourself, drink a certain amount of water, exercise every day, whatever it may be. In the very beginning, I literally started tracking, I think like 4 habits. It was, okay, what are the most important things that I should be doing every day to get more listeners, to grow my social media, and to make more money? So it was post every day on social media, track your finances, and reach out to one member of the community. Those 3 things, that's all you got to do. And that's where I started. And now I think I'm at the point where I do, 23 or something a day. So just a couple of mine. One of mine is I play the gratitude game with my fiance every night. So every night before we go to bed, we say one thing we're grateful for about one another. Simple, only takes a minute, but it's just a nice positive habit to have. Another habit for me is I weigh myself every day, whether I'm dieting, whether I'm exercising, which I usually am, but I always try to do that just so I can have a level of awareness. And then every single day I track our finances, the business finances. I know exactly how much money we spent. I know how much we made, and I know what we're projected for over the next 12 months. Those are some of the most important ones. The way to do it for most people is to figure out, okay, well, what's the ultimate end goal? Okay, I want to lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks. Okay, awesome. Under that umbrella of your goal that you're trying to hit, what is one new behavior I can start with today? And then just make it as simple as humanly possible. I'm going to weigh myself first thing in the morning. That's it. I do believe for most people, Christine, there has to be a high enough level of necessity, and there has to be some level of accountability. I am just somebody who's pretty good at habits, but the reason I am pretty good at habits is because we have a dashboard where everybody on our team can see my habits. So they see exactly what I'm doing. They see exactly what I'm not doing. So find yourself a peak performance partner, find yourself a coach, find yourself some form of accountability where there is a perceived pain to you not doing your habits. The perceived pain of not accomplishing your goals has to be higher than the quote unquote discomfort of you doing your habits, or it won't work long term for you.
Yeah, that is very important, the necessity. I actually absolutely love it. I'm a fan of Marshall Goldsmith. I don't know if you know him. He wrote awesome books, Take It to the Next Level. What got you here won't take you there. He's an executive coach, and he has the evening questions. And he always said, everyone needs help. And he still has a coach because he needs help.
Yeah.
And we all can get better at something. And it's not about beating us up that we are not good enough. No, we can get better at one thing. And it may take a year for you to get good enough at that one thing, and that's fine.
Yep. Yep.
I think it's a little steps in life, and you said that beautifully.
I appreciate that.
Now, you seem to be a very strategic and organized person. Those persons are usually the most successful, and I'm happy to have you here today. What's in your future?
Oh man, we started a charity initiative recently, which has been awesome because it's one of the easier things we do that can actually have a large level of impact. And that's awesome. So it's called Next Level Hope Foundation. And Alan and myself both grew up without fathers. So we both grew up in single parent households. So what we do is we rent out a YMCA or a recreation center, and we host children who are in single parent families. And we have like events, and we have sports, and we have food, and we have gifts and all that happy jazz. So that's something that we've really leaned into over the last couple of years. And that's something amazing. And we're very grateful to be able to give back. And we're just going to keep podcasting, Christine. That's what we do. We podcast every day. And that's our ultimate goal, to give back to the community and be in your pocket every day for free. That is what we're all about.
That is wonderful.
Thank you.
Now, what's in the pocket for Kevin for the future personally? I heard a fiance.
I'm actually leaving. So we're recording this on a Friday. I'm leaving Sunday to go to Colorado to get married. So I will be married in the next couple days, which that is a big thing for me. And I'm very excited. I have the best partner in the world. She's unreasonably supportive of my goals and what it takes for me to accomplish those goals. So I'm very blessed and very grateful and deeply in love. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend the rest of my life with her.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so happy to hear that. And I hope that will be a marriage forever.
Thank you. That's the goal.
And maybe there will be even little kids that join the sparkling family.
Always a possibility.
Well, you never know. Oh, I love those smiles. What do you think about the value of dreaming?
Ooh, my favorite quote, Christine, is your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold onto and pour into the longest. It basically could be, if you have a dream and you pour into that dream eventually could become reality. I think as we get older, we're taught, hey, think realistically. Think more realistically. That's never going to happen. And I think the importance of dreaming is it allows you to believe in a brighter, a more exciting, a more fulfilling, and a more aligned future. I think dreaming is unreasonably important. And that's who we talk to, dream chasers. That's what we say all the time. If you're a dream chaser, you're on this mission with us. So I think, yeah, I believe that just like daydreaming when you're younger, you're thinking of something different than you're thinking of now. And maybe it's bigger, maybe it's different, maybe it's in a different direction. I think the importance of dreaming is very, very high. And I think it would serve people to do it more, but just make sure you're backing up your dreams with action, because if not, it'll be a dream forever and never a reality.
That is an important point. You have to back up the dreams with action. So if you're just dreaming, the law of attraction never will work. Because you'll be stuck in your head. I sometimes say to my clients, stop dreaming, start doing.
100%. Yeah. It's great to have dreams, but if you're not making progress towards them, they're just going to stay up in your head forever.
Yeah. And I think that's an important message that some people have to hear, and I hope they're listening today. Now, to wind that up, what would be the most important thing that you would tell the listeners to this show that are often struggling with mental health issues? And then what would be options for them, in your opinion, to get the most out of contacting you, listening to you, learning from you?
I think one of the keys is to talk about it. Really, when I started having mental health struggles, I went to therapy and I went to counseling, and that helped me tremendously. So just having somebody who can look at it and say, hey, it's going to be okay, or hey, I understand, or I empathize. I think a lot of us, when we're dealing with mental health struggles, we think that we're alone. And understanding that you're not alone, and there's a bunch of other people out there who are going through their own stuff, but also a bunch of people out there who want to help you and do care about you and do love you. I think that's just an important understanding to have. And then I would seek out support. I really think that's one of the most beneficial things in the world. That helped me. I'm always talking about therapy and how it's a brave thing to do. Is it scary at times? It can be, yes, but it is not weak to do it. It is actually the opposite. It is very strong to ask for help. And then if anybody wants to chat with me, you can listen to our podcast. We are Next Level University. We drop an episode every single day. So no matter when you need a little inspiration, motivation, or education, we will be there. And then you can reach out to me on Instagram. That is the best place. My handle is @NeverQuitKid. I am happy to answer all my DMs. If you send me an audio, send me a video, I will send you one back, I promise.
Wow, Kevin, that is awesome. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being a host on a guest on the podcast. I said host, it's just as good. You're amazing. I'm fortunate to have met you, and I wish you all the best for your future, whether it comes to wealth, love, or health.
Thank you. I appreciate this. This was truly wonderful, Christine.
And that was it today for Sparkles for Mental Health. I hope to see you for the next episode. Bye-bye.